Hey everyone, it is January 29, 2014. I'm Rene Ritchie, and right now we're going to talk about Apple's Q1 2015 earnings, the iPad 5 years later, and a lot more. This is the iMore Show. Joining me today, I have, as usual, the always entertaining, often kaiju-related, I mispronounced kaiju, Peter. That's appalling. Peter Cohen, how are you?
I'm surviving.
You were snowed in.
Weather this week, yes.
And then this morning, your internet got hit by a snowplow.
No, yesterday my internet got hit by a snowplow, and today they finally fixed it, so I'm back online just in time for the show.
Is there any truth to the rumor that the Boston Yeti sightings is just you getting your snowpaper, your newspaper in the morning in your bunny suit?
You know, I was reading a few months ago about this woman who takes walks or walks her dog in an outfit that looks like the Abominable Snowman from those old claymation shows that we used to watch when we were kids. That's how I would rock it. I would not try to pull off this Yeti look.
I'll introduce her first. We also have, filling in for Ali Kazmuha, who could not be here today, we have Georgia Dow, and we have a mutual friend who goes out in winter in a Wookiee suit.
Yes, we do. We do, but it's a great-looking Wookiee suit because it really is, you know, he is like Chewie. He's got the entire, you know, armature that goes across the side. And
a very hairy face, so it kind of fits in.
It does, it does. It does great photography, though. I'm very good.
And filling in for an also on special assignment, Trinity Caldwell, we have the one, the only, the incomparable Jason Snell.
Hi, everybody. Hi, cold people. I'm out here in California. Also, Renee, you're still writing 2014 on your podcast intros. It's still January. I'll give you till the end of the month, but right. You're gonna have to get with it. It's 2015 now.
I don't want to change, Jason. I'm not ready to be a year older and a year closer to the end of the sun's lifespan.
Mm-hmm.
It's like one of the first hacks you should learn is that, you know, right before it changes, you should write down 2015 a good 30, 40 times, just so that on your checks they don't get sent back.
What's a check?
Well, we don't have Apple Pay yet, so...
so painful. You know. I'm used to Leo Laporte being in between me and Jason on videos. This is an unusually non-intermediated experience.
Well, you know, it's all me, Renee. It's you and me, man.
All right, so Apple earnings. Jason, you've been covering these, you know, at first at Macworld for as long as there has been an Apple, and now on.
That's not true. That is a lie.
As long as there's been.
Apple was founded when I was like 5 years old. Okay.
As long as there has been a second coming at Apple. How's that?
Oh yeah. All right. Fair enough.
All right.
You win.
So how are these earnings for you? How do they relate historically? What do these earnings mean for us?
I can't. I mean, I kind of can't fathom it. This is one of those things where you say, okay, it's going to be a holiday quarter, so it's going to be huge because Apple's very seasonal. The holiday quarter is gigantic, and then you pull out a number that's like, well, you know, last year they did, you know, this many billion, so this year will probably be bigger because it's usually bigger. And it was. I mean, the numbers track pretty well. It sort of tracks with their growth. The iPhone number, though, is just kind of hard to process. And as a whole, I mean, this was the best financial quarter any public company has ever had. And after a while, the numbers are just so large. You know, people talk about the law of large numbers and referring to how fast Apple can grow. I would like to talk about the law of large numbers in terms of humans not being able to understand how big something is. It's like Apple's quarter was so big that it's actually kind of hard for us to even grasp how big it was. The stat that kills me is the Apple sold in that quarter, in that 3-month span, Apple sold an iPhone. I'm going to do it now. I'm going to say an iPhone every 9 seconds. It didn't. It sold 9 iPhones every second. 24 hours a day for 3 months during that quarter. It's just mind-boggling.
Apple makes more money than companies that have oligopoly control over fossil fuel resources.
Apple's cash could buy, like, think of 5 really big, but not the biggest, but really big tech companies. Apple could buy them all with the money in its back pocket. I mean, it's just crazy.
With some change to spare.
Ben Thompson had some great context where he said that Apple lost more money on currency fluctuation than Google earned profits last quarter.
Yeah, that was, if you listen to the analyst call, it was actually hilarious because all they would talk about, all the CFO was talking about was financial headwinds involving hedging and financial markets. And it turns out when you've got that much cash, taxes and financial and currency fluctuations have a huge impact because it's not just pocket change anymore. You're talking about, you know, tens of billions of dollars.
George, I mean, some people look at this and they say Apple is making too much money. They return it to the shareholders, but they should also return it to us by making things cheaper. Is that fair, or should Apple just make as much money as they possibly can?
Well, I don't mind as long as they make better stuff for me. That's really the way that I think about it. I think that if I think that this is a huge testament to Tim Cook. I think a lot of people gave him a really hard time when he was trying to fill such large shoes of Steve Jobs. And look at what he has done. No one can say that Tim Cook is not amazing at the helm of this company. And so, yeah, I think that they can keep all of these earnings and just invest it into the company to bring me some of the coolest technologies that could be. You know what I'm thinking of.
To that point, about a year ago, Jason and I were sitting in the diner across from the Twit Brick House talking about Haunted Empire and how Tim Cook was doomed and there was nothing after Steve Jobs.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, how
Yeah.
that is.
But it's fair. It's fair for everyone to worry because Steve Jobs really to fill those shoes. It's a really big deal. But wow, he's doing a fabulous job. And look at it. Look at it. Just wow.
It almost doesn't fit in your charts, Jason. I'm looking at your charts, and it almost looks like you had to add it here.
The scale. I have to change the scale on an ongoing basis because it's the numbers are just that huge. It's crazy. I mean, like I said, you can make some guesses and maybe you'll even be right, but then when you try to think about what the number actually means, that's when it gets even weirder.
I was trying to compare it because Samsung announced their earnings yesterday, and Samsung is often put up as a big rival to Apple. And Samsung declares their earnings in trillions of won, South Korean won. And for some reason, I was trying to convert Apple's numbers to South Korean won, and I think I broke the machine at quadrillions. I ran out of won.
Too many. Not enough zeros.
It really is flabbergasting. Now, there's some concern, and I don't know if you guys feel it's justified or not, that Apple that so much of this is tied up in one product, in the iPhone, and it's not really spread across their different product lines.
That's true. The iPhone, if you look at the numbers, and this is the case where my chart looks like a rocket taking off. It's like there's all their other businesses which are pretty good businesses, and that's the problem with charts that chart percentage of Apple revenue because it looks like everything else is terrible, and actually the Mac and the iPad are doing pretty well, but the iPhone is just in a different category, and it also points out the lie that people have that's like, oh, Apple needs another thing to be like the iPhone. It's like there's nothing like the iPhone. There's not going to be something like the iPhone for a very long time. Smartphones as a category is a very different category than just about any other technology product, and you see it. It's just, it is, without that, Apple's a pretty big company, but with it, it is the biggest.
People buy phones, every couple of years people are going to buy a new phone. Usually people can't afford to buy a new laptop as often as that. They don't need to buy an iPod and, an iPad. Most people besides you, Rene, because look at all the technology that's beside you, but most people will not be buying every single iPad that happens to come out and is in existence. So I think that that's why they have that lynch market on the iPhone. Plus, it's fabulous. Just saying.
The thing that was I don't want to say strange, but the thing that was strange to me is they said they had record number of Android adopters, and it looks like that's mostly outside the U.S., people switching from Android to iPhone. But they also said they had a very small percentage, I forget the exact number, 10 or 15% or something, of people upgrading iPhones. And I don't understand how you have this many iPhones sold with still that giant amount of people who haven't upgraded yet. I mean, that makes these numbers look, I don't know, even weirder in context.
Well, China is a big part of that. The growth in China is massive, and there are a lot of people who haven't had an iPhone or haven't had a smartphone before who are buying in China. That's a big fueling of growth. But you're right. It does seem weird that in the first, whatever it was, 2.5 months that the iPhone 6s were on sale, that Apple thinks only, 15 or 20%. But that's, 2-year contracts roll through, and so, it's understandable that that's the number, but what's hard to understand is that that's the number, and yet this bulk number is so high, but it's crazy.
That's the thing, is because when the Verizon iPhone came out, everyone thought there would be a swarm to hit Verizon, and instead it was very steady because people waited for their AT&T contracts to run out before going to Verizon. This year we have the same thing. There are probably people waiting for their contracts to run out before going to an iPhone 6 or 6 Plus, but we still have the crazy. It's a creative crazy. It's huge sat.
It's the yeah. Did everybody take a drink when Tim did drop some customer sat on the call? Which is he loves customer sat, but he was talking about and defending the iPad and saying people love the iPad. One customer said it was 100% satisfaction, and that must have been Tim must have been like popping corks of champagne when they got that one.
When they hit 101, boy, it's like. So focusing on China for a second, Apple was criticized the same way they've been criticized for not making netbooks, for not making really less expensive phones for China. Everyone believed that the Southeast Asian market in general needed less expensive phones. Turns out Apple made more expensive phones and did okay anyway.
Yeah, well, that's a regional product, the iPhone 6 Plus, and they mentioned, they call them geos, apparently. We got some more Apple jargon, that in certain geos, the iPhone 6 Plus did better, and that was what their story was all along, was that in Asia, the 6 Plus was going to be huge, and then in other places, it's not as big, and it just kind of varies. But Apple was up everywhere, but in Asia, they were up. In Greater China, they call it, they were way up. And the iPhone 6 Plus, they didn't break out the sales figures, but if you look at the average selling price, there's obviously embedded in the iPhone average selling price is the iPhone 6 Plus having more, and also the 16, 64, 128 factor where there's no 32, so a lot of people are opting for the $100 more iPhone. But I think the 6 Plus has got to be part of the story there too.
Yeah, those two things are super interesting. So the iPhone 6 Plus is $100 more expensive than a similarly equipped iPhone 6. At the same time, Apple left the 16-gigabyte version, did not include a 32-gigabyte version, but dropped the price of the 64-gigabyte version by $100, added a 128-gigabyte version at the old price of the 64-gigabyte version. So the average sales price went up by $100, but the options for the storage went down by $100, and it seems like taken together that resulted in the ASP, the average sales price, going up, and that's one of the things that the analysts just love so much.
Yeah. It's funny when you listen to the analysts because their concerns. We like to see what Apple's doing to understand their business and understand why Apple does what it does and what that means for the products going forward. But the analysts are looking at it from this investment perspective, and so you get these very different. They are really excited about average selling prices and and the margin, the profit margin,
inventory, margin.
Yeah, and
marginal tax rates.
Yeah, you give me a little more color on the marginal tax rate implications for Greater China. They care about that, and it's just funny to see that, and it is, it's their show. We're gleaning what we can about the products and how Apple runs its business, but the analysts are they're playing a different game and they're looking for different things.
They're hedge rollouts. What are those hedges? What are those hedges timing?
Oh, the hedges. They're between the hedges.
Peter, I want to get you fully engaged here, so I'm going to mention one word to you: Mac sales.
Yeah, Mac sales were great. I mean, Mac sales were really off the chart last quarter. Apple managed to do something incredible with I think 5.52 million units moved during the quarter. So it was kind of a question mark as to how well they were going to do this quarter. But they, I think, surprised a lot of people with 5.519 million units sold for the quarter. So Mac sales were technically flat sequentially, but if you take a look at that last quarter was just really anomalous to begin with. Having said that, speaking of average selling prices, ASPs on Macs went up too, to the tune of about $60 per unit. And Luca Maestri on the call attributed that to strong sales of the 5K iMac, which starts at $24.99. So I guess they can thank you personally, Rene.
I think Jason got one too. I think it's not just
I'm speaking to you from one right now. Boy, I helped shoot that ASP up for the Mac. Man, but yeah, it was. I mean, there's somebody kicking themselves somewhere saying, "Man, if we just sold 1,000 more Macs, we could have set the record again." But oh well. It was a great quarter. It is the second best Mac quarter ever, and just by a hair over last quarter. So it's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, outside of the strong sales of 5K iMacs, I'm really curious to see what models moved. I know anecdotally at the store that I work at, we push more MacBook Airs than just about anything else. People love, love, love the MacBook Air. They just can't get enough of it. Compared to that, I don't think we sell anything even close to that. Retina MacBook Pros, nuh-uh. iMacs, nuh-uh. Although we have been moving a fair amount of 5K iMacs, I have to admit that as well. So it'll be really interesting to know what the mix is, but of course that is not color that Apple is willing to share with analysts anymore because it's a competitive disadvantage.
Yeah, and they didn't give ASP. They gave the difference in ASP for the Macs sequentially, not year after year, sequentially, but they didn't break out the numbers.
Mm-hmm.
Which is interesting. Georgia, a question for you. What's on your wrist right now?
Wrist, Rene, wrist. I'm waiting. They're keeping me waiting till the end of when I have to be waiting. It's killing me.
Yeah, so Tim Cook did say it is coming in April. He gave you a bit of a date. A month, not a day, but a month.
Which we know it's not going to be the 1st of April because, they would say that just because.
April Fool.
Right. But so I'm waiting. I'm in dire straits waiting for my watch, which I have been asking for I believe 4 years now. That's my thought on it. Might be 3.
Georgia would have pumped up the ASP on the watches if she could have, but she.
All on my own. Buy 4. One for the ankles. One.
So are you upset you didn't get more information about that, Georgia? Would you like a date? Would you like price points? Are we waiting too long for this information? Do you want to know everything now?
I do. I want to know everything now. But unfortunately, I'm so eager for this. It wouldn't matter. I am getting one. It doesn't matter really the price. Which is a horrible, showing your hand this early, not great. But for me, I've been dying for this watch. So if it's $300, if it's $600, I'm buying a watch because I've been waiting for my watch.
Apple should totally do an early release program for you like they do for iTunes movies and say you can have it a week early for an extra $1,000.
Maybe not an extra $1,000, but if it was an extra $100 and it was in 2 months early, I would be there.
Apple Watch early release program. You should get on that.
Mm-hmm.
Jason, you said that basically when we thought it would, right?
Well, that's what Tim Cook said in the call. He said basically when we thought, and he crystallized down something that we've observed in Apple's terminology before, but it was kind of nice to have him say it. It's almost like note to journalists who cover us. You should know this about us, which is when we say early 2015, we don't mean January 3rd. We mean sometime in the first 4 months of 2015. And then when we say mid 2015, we mean the next 4 months. And when we say late, we mean the last 4 months. Just because one of the analysts basically said, oh, so it's not going to be until April, so that's obviously it's later than you guys expected. And Tim Cook was quick to say, nope, it's pretty much what we thought, and we consider early in the year to run through the end of April. So they didn't say. I think they didn't say spring. It has varied, but April qualifies as both spring and early under Apple terms. So now you know.
And it matches it's going to match pretty closely, I think, at least the iPad rollout from 2010, because that rolled out on that schedule because it makes a lot of sense from when they can get everything into place. It's far enough away from Christmas. It's a very good period to move out a new product.
Yeah, exactly. And let's keep in mind that with demand, and it's a new manufacturing process entirely, they that takes time too, because they got to ramp up. They can't, if they're gonna sell them in April, they got to start making them maybe next month or in March. They got to start stockpiling them. And this is a completely new product, and there probably will also be not only are there engineering issues, but there are production line issues, because this is a thing that they just haven't had before. So you throw that all in there, it's a complex situation. They want to get past the iPhone launch and past the holidays. So now is the time where they're presumably ramping up for that April release.
George, I'm sure there's some psychology to explain this, but Peter's been getting this as much as I have. But for every complaint we get that Apple's moving too fast, that they need to slow down, they need to take care of bugs, they need to refactor stuff, we get 2 or 3 complaints saying Apple is too slow. Where's my watch? Where's my photos for Mac? They want Apple to simultaneously accelerate and put on the brakes.
Well, I think that what people want everything, right? We all, unfortunately, are exceptionally demanding populace. That's just our makeup. It's one of the things that makes humans so resilient. But what we want is that they want everything to work and to work exceptionally efficiently, and then to get all kinds of new cool treats and trinkets at exactly the same time, which is impossible to be able to have both things. And so I think for Apple, they have to be really careful about not pushing out more things than they can keep up their level of quality, which is their namesake. Like, it's really difficult once you lose faith in a product to gain it back. And so for Apple, they do have to make sure that they only send out products once they know that they're comfortable with, and so that we can still have this trust that Apple products just work.
It's funny because I put up a post about the quality issues people were talking about, and so many of the comments were, yes, Apple absolutely has to slow down as long as they add XYZ that I really want.
Right. They can slow down as long as I get what I need to have at the time when I want it.
Yeah, I was because we had a bunch of people asking about the Photos app recently because Apple.com is no longer showing the preview for it. They're just showing the stuff that's shipped. And the thing was, give it to me now. I want it now. I want it immediately. Where I would rather Apple do exactly what Jason said is take that early 2015, go to the end of that period, go to April, and put out a really solid product because my photos are important to me. And Peter, you've been writing about this a lot too. I would rather Apple take the full amount of time that they've given a window for this product and made sure it's really good rather than me have to have problems with it if it launches early.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, through the past few product cycles, and I mean, this is kind of an ongoing thing. This isn't unique just to Mavericks and Yosemite, but Mavericks and Yosemite have been plagued with some very significant issues for a fair number of users, whether it's Wi-Fi reliability or email problems or what have you. So Apple really needs to get its eye on the ball when it comes to quality control for these new apps like Photos for Mac. Photos is obviously a really key area for Mac because, to be frank, I think that Apple's focus on photos hasn't really been strong on the Mac for a long time now. Aperture has been a sort of has languished in the dust for a long time compared to what Adobe's been doing with Lightroom. It still gets the job done for a lot of photographers, but Apple really hasn't put anything into it. So, Apple's pro photo strategy is non-existent. And iPhoto has been around for many, many years now, but iPhoto has always kind of felt grafted onto the iCloud ecosystem. It hasn't really felt completely integrated into that, at least not nearly as well as Photos feels on the iOS side. So I agree with you, Rene. I would much prefer to see Apple take its time and make sure to get Photos exactly right for whatever it can do for a 1.0 release before releasing it onto the unsuspecting public, rather than ready, fire, aim.
Yeah, especially with the way that how personalized people feel about photos. And photography is just that it is a representation of themselves and their loved ones. And if they mess it up, the anger, the visceral anger that people will feel towards their Apple products would be huge. So I think that it is a really good idea to make sure that they do a good job with that and take the time. And yes, people will be upset, but that will be forgotten once they have something that works really well and that people can have trust to be able to take photos and everything is secure, safe, and done exactly as they want it. Because people are taking pictures of moments in their life that they may never get back again and keeping and storing and showing them. So I think that it's a better idea to just wait, make it fabulous, and people will end up being happier for it.
Like the watch, Georgia, right? That's why you're so happy to wait till April for the watch?
I'm not.
Because you want it to work?
I'm not. I'm not happy about it, but I do want the product to really work and have a great run through, and I want it to expand, so I am willing to wait unhappily, because more wrist, Rene, just more wrist here. So I'm unhappy about it, but because I really want it to be successful, and if it's successful, we'll get better features on the watch, and it's not going to be a product that will be dropped. It would break my heart. So
like the iPod Hi-Fi.
I will wait till the last day of April on bated breath.
All right, Jason, it's the year of Apple Pay. I mean, a few years ago it was the year of the iPad 2, and now it's the year of Apple Pay.
Again, decreed by Tim Cook. He said, "We think this is the year of Apple Pay. Let it be so." And so, I guess by the end of the year, by the end of the year, throw away your credit cards. It's just going to be Apple Pay accepted everywhere, and they don't take American Express unless it's on Apple Pay, and then they do. They're really bullish on it. They are. Dare I say, doubling down on Apple Pay, where they were really excited about it when they rolled it out in the fall. And in the analyst call, they it's about money. The analysts love that kind of thing. But they were really excited. They said that they've got the traction is amazing. I think they said that 2 out of every 3 contactless payments in the U.S. is being made with Apple Pay, which is
$3 maybe.
Or maybe that's it, because they mix and match the number of transactions with the dollars being spent, whichever was more favorable to them. So yeah, maybe it's 2/3 of the money being spent. And then in stores that have had this, it's reported that the vast majority, I think it was 80% of the money being spent in one store, and like Whole Foods said that their transactions of contactless had gone up by some insane percentage. So all the numbers are looking good. And it seems like the banks really want this to happen. The banks are really marketing Apple Pay, which puts pressure on retailers. Consumers are putting pressure on retailers. I think this is why Apple has the confidence they do. And they asked, I know I'm speaking, half of us are in Canada. The analysts asked about international rollouts, and it's interesting. Tim Cook said it's a lot like rolling out the iPhone internationally, where you've got different carriers. There are different banks and different standards and different vendors for the hardware, and different cultural assumptions about how you spend money in all of these different places. So they seemed really confident that they're going to be doing a lot of international rollouts in 2015, and that's only right because apparently it's the year of International Year of Apple Pay.
International,
yes.
That is so. There was a couple of criticisms that followed up on that, and I wasn't sure all of them were fair. So I want your guys' opinion. So the two big ones were that unless Apple achieves ubiquity, people are not going to have confidence in it because they won't know whether they can use it or not. But in my experience, I don't know when they can use it. Like I go to stores that don't take American Express, that don't take credit cards, that only take cash. So my default position is never knowing what something can take when I go into a store. And the other one was that people are conning banks into adding them to fake credit cards or stolen credit cards. But to me, that's just, again, that's not an Apple issue. That's these banks get conned with all sorts of different fraud issues, and that's part of the reason why things like Apple Pay are interesting, because maybe they can help with that. Georgia, do you have a when it finally arrives in our blessed Great North? Are you going to worry if it's at every store, or are you going to favor the stores that do have it? How are you going to feel?
Well, my problem will be that it'll be too easy for me to buy things because I will get, I really like this, and then I end up with like 3, I don't know where my Groots are, then I end up with like 3 Groots because I was so excited to buy it, it didn't come up earlier, and then I have 6 of them. It's going to be the ease of pay, but I think that that's going to be a boon for Apple, and people don't like to have to look for my credit card. Just having my credit card out is a chance that I will lose it because I am just so forgetful. I put everything out because my purse is some sort of death trap of like a bag of holding that you can never find what you need to be holding in this bag. So I think that its ease of use is what I'm going to like most about it. I think that the danger is that people are going to be using this everywhere. It's going to be really, really simple. But since Apple is such a trusted product, you trust what you put in. They're really good for privacy, and I think that they're going to help work for the banks to make them even more secure. I don't really see a downside to this. Like, yeah, there's going to be fraud, there's going to be issues that are going to come up, but there are with credit cards. They are when you have PIN numbers. They are when you're signing it. I don't know.
Yeah, it's interesting. I like how you said like the gamify thing, because one of the things that I thought also makes this interesting is that right now it's iPhone 6 and iPhone 6 Plus only, and yeah, they sold 70 million of those phones. But with the Apple Watch coming out, you'll have people who have the Apple Watch can then use it with an iPhone 5 and iPhone 5 Plus as well. And exactly what you said, it gamifies it. It makes it fun. Like some people said, you need like a loyalty card or you need Apple points. Like you buy everything you buy gets you an Apple point that you can redeem on the iTunes store or something to make it fun. But I think the idea of paying with your phone and paying with your watch is fun all by itself.
It is. It's so exciting just to not have to be able to search for everything. Everyone has their phone in an easy manner to use. It's something that's much more secure, and so I think that its ease of use in and of itself is going to be beneficial. I can't wait until I don't have to wait in line as well. I can just Apple Pay it just somewhere and then walk out of the store like I can do with at the Apple Store, which is always a little bit, it does freak me out a little bit. I'm waiting for someone to come and tackle me on my way out of buying something at an Apple Store because I've just paid all on my own.
It's like using Nexus at the
another system.
Peter, you said you still don't use it that often.
That's right. Yeah, I guess I might as well be in Canada, not only based on the weather, but also based off the frequency with which I use Apple Pay. I've used Apple Pay exactly twice. Once was at McDonald's, and once was at Panera, and I haven't eaten at either of those places in months. So I haven't really had another chance to do it. The drugstore that I do most of my my work at is. Or that I do most of my shopping at is CVS, and they're not aligned with Apple Pay yet. And I do most of my grocery shopping at Stop and Shop. So the two places that I would use electronic payments absolutely the most are two places that don't accept Apple Pay yet. So it's been a little bit disappointing for me. Having said that, when I have had an opportunity to use it, it has been very convenient. It's worked just as elegantly and perfectly as I've wanted it to. So I've got absolutely no complaints with how it works. I would just like to see it more widespread. I don't know that it really needs ubiquity in order to succeed, but I would just like to see it in more places that I actually do shopping at. And I'm sure that that will happen. It's just a matter of time.
So the fact that Currency is kind of like holding this contract over everyone that they can't have Apple Pay yet is stopping you from being able to use it.
In CVS's case, definitely. I don't know what the mitigating circumstance is for Stop and Shop. They're a pretty big, they're a pretty big grocery store chain here in the Northeast. I'm actually surprised that Apple hasn't managed to work out a deal with them yet. I don't know if they're foreign overlords. The company that Ahold, the company that owns them, has a relationship with somebody else.
Sorry, what's the company's name that owns them?
Ahold. Which is
Okay.
often how I feel after I get my grocery bill.
I heard something else. Sorry.
As to those contracts, I mean, we look at some of them, and Target already has Apple Pay in-app. So, Jason, my guess is that when those contracts they signed a long time ago for a service that has still not launched start to expire, which I believe is this year, it's not hard to imagine they'll switch over.
Yeah, they're gonna lose. The currency thing, it's like, do you remember the original like DivX, which was a technology that no consumer ever wanted, that they were trying to push on consumers? It's like that. It's an industry thing. It's going to collapse. The fact that the banks and many of the retailers and Apple are behind this, that's too many players who are on that team. And Walmart, maybe Walmart will go it alone because Walmart was sort of the instigator here. But I think a lot of these other vendors are going to say, look, we would rather have our customers be happy and spend money happily in our stores rather than feel like we're kind of being jerks to them. Maybe they'll get a concession out of Apple. When I was at the event, and you were very close to me actually at that moment, I think, Rene. I asked them about loyalty cards, and the person, and I don't know if they've talked a lot about it, but I talked to an Apple person who said Apple Pay should be able to handle loyalty cards. So that's one of those cases where it's an incentive for the retailers. It allows you to opt to give personal information about your transaction. If you want to, you could do that, and it adds convenience because then you're not running two cards or putting in your phone number when you check out at the supermarket. So we'll see in this year of Apple Pay exactly how it all comes to be. But I'm encouraged. I use it at Whole Foods because I've got a Whole Foods right down the street from my house, and I bought a hot dog at the World Series using it. That was just kind of a novelty. It was fun, but I like it. Sometimes I don't have cash with me. Sometimes I don't even have my credit card with me, and having another payment option is good, and it's super easy. I think in the end it's going to be the super easy thing that puts it over the top. Even if you've got a credit card in your pocket, I mean, your phone's out, you're gone, done, you're a ghost, you're out of there. I think that's good. So I think.
Who took that hot dog?
Let's hear it. Yeah, the hot dog was pretty good. I mean, it's a ballpark hot dog. And then they won the game, so pretty much the Apple Pay won the World Series.
It was the year of the Jason. Never mind Apple Pay. In a fictional multiverse where Apple Pay is in Canada, it would be here. It would be supporting like the Lego VIP card before that massive helicarrier Lego comes out. Just saying, Apple, no pressure.
That would be Apple Pay, eh?
Apple Pay. Yeah. We don't talk like that in Quebec, Jason. It'd be Apple Pay Lolo.
That's less good.
Couldn't be in so much trouble. So the one story that people who were looking for a negative could easily pin the negativity on was the iPad. 5 years, almost to the day, after Steve Jobs showed it off on stage. The iPad, it accelerated to 100 miles an hour incredibly fast, but it's still stuck on a highway that says 100 miles an hour on it, and it's not speeding. Jason, you wrote about the name, but I think the whole story this week was fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, Tim Cook spent a lot of time talking about the iPad and where they think it's going, and they don't. I mean, they can't hide the fact that sales are sort of flat. It's not that the sales are bad, really. It's that they're flat, and it's not that they're not. The iPad they have lots of stats about how well the iPad does in the tablet market. Like I think 80% of commerce is done on tablets is done on iPads. So the Android tablets that are out there are not are not liked and are not
video
used.
players.
The iPads are liked and used. The larger issue is the product category. And I think, Tim Cook says he thinks in the long arc of history, the iPad and the tablets will be a good product category. He does have some things that he throws out there, like how it's very clear the replacement rate is not a smartphone replacement rate. We get spoiled, like Georgia was saying earlier, with these 2-year turnarounds when you get a new phone. That doesn't happen with tablets. The tablets are actually pretty good for quite a while, and so and what Cook said is we don't really even know. 5 years isn't enough time to get a real good sense of what the true replacement rate is for tablets, and I think that's true. I kind of agree with him. I feel like this is an additional category, and some of it will be cannibalization from other products, and some of its growth will be hurt by the fact that we've got small laptops that are great too. But I do think it's a real category. It's just, it's not a smartphone category. It's the iPad and the Mac make about the same amount of money for Apple quarter by quarter. It's not a bad category at all. It's just not the iPhone. But then nothing is.
Yeah, there was a great tweet, and I forget who did it, and they tweeted, the headline for Microsoft sells hundreds of thousands of Surfaces. Yay, they're booming. Apple sells millions of iPads. Boo, they're busting.
Yeah.
And I upgraded to the iPad Air 2. Did you as well, Jason?
No, I'm still using my what is now has been retconned to be the iPad Mini 2, and which doesn't have Touch ID, but I still love it. I have an Air 2 here, that's my review unit, but I use the iPad Mini 2 all the time.
And I know Serenity got it too, and Allie got it too. Georgia, you're still using the iPad Air 1?
I am.
You didn't upgrade?
No, and I have many different versions of iPads, but unfortunately, the placement where I would use an iPad, I now use my MacBook Air. It's just as light, easy, and I can type on it a little bit faster. I like the fact if I was gaming on it, it has just a larger amount of real estate, having a larger screen than on my iPhone 6 Plus. But now my iPhone 6 Plus is more portable and enormous. So I have not touched my Air. Any of my iPads, actually, they're all dead right now. I'm looking at them as they're like rest in peace, my poor, field of all dead iPads right now sitting.
You're a monster.
I know. I use my Air and I use my Plus right now, and that has kept me sustained.
Well, that's the pressure they face, because with bigger screen, they have bigger screen iPhones on the bottom, and they have laptops that are lighter and longer battery life than ever on top of them. And Peter, I don't think you upgraded this year either.
I haven't upgraded in quite some time. I've got you all beat. I'm still using an iPad 3.
Wow.
I know. I feel like, the cranky old man in the group here, but I guess that's kind of my role, so I'll just accept it. But yeah, I every iPad generation that's come out, I've been like, yeah, that's great, but my iPad is still getting by, and I don't really feel the need to drop another $500 or $600 to replace it right now. I like the full-sized iPad. I have no interest in the Mini. If I were going to downsize, I would go with the iPhone 6 Plus as opposed to going to a Mini. But having that 10-inch form factor, that 9.7-inch form factor, I really enjoy. And look, I understand implicitly. I sell these things on the weekends. I understand implicitly just how much the iPad has evolved. It's gotten thinner. It's gotten lighter. It's gotten just oodles more powerful. And there's Jason hauling out the old school.
Here's the original. It's
the OI, the original.
Look at that side. The iPad doesn't have a side anymore.
Right, exactly.
I think your iMac is thinner than that, Jason.
Yeah, probably. Yeah.
But in our house, we've got we've got an iPad 3, we've got an iPad 2, and we've got 2 original iPads. 3 original iPads, come to think of it, and we've never upgraded. They're still getting us by for what we use them for. And certainly we've had to temper our expectations for how we can use them over the years as software has developed that we can't run on these devices, and as we've gotten used to them being too slow to run some stuff that we might otherwise like to. But the value proposition isn't there for us to drop, at least $2,000 or so that we would need to buy replacement gear for ourselves. So we continue to eke by, and I suspect, based on what we're seeing, from in the market as a whole, that our use case is not that far off the mark. I know anecdotally that on the weekends when I see customers coming in who are looking to upgrade, they're looking to upgrade original iPads. I was going to say original message pads. Yeah, that would be cool. But original iPads that they've had since they came out in 2010 or shortly before the iPad 2 came out in 2011. They're devices that have gotten people by for a very long time, and they're now just getting around to replacing. So, it is a very different upgrade cycle than a phone, which is something that you haul out of your pocket several times a day and use constantly. Or I think even potentially a computer, which you may go through faster and need to replace because maybe you've maxed out the hard drive and you need something larger, or your needs have changed. The iPad is more of a casual device for many of us. For those of us in corporate environments and education and elsewhere where we're actually using these for the vertical markets that we hear about from Apple all the time, it's probably a bit of a different story. That probably requires you to upgrade a little bit more thoughtfully. But for many of us, it just is not that big a deal to keep using an iPad for years and years after we have it. And quite frankly, I hope that my iPad 3 sticks around for a while because I am still quite happy with it. To George's point, though, I find myself exactly in the situation that she was in. I remember when the iPad came out in 2010, I spent the better part of that year trying to figure out how to get it into a workflow that worked for me as a writer, as somebody who wanted to put words on the thing. And, I tried to learn how to type using the keyboard and discovered that I'm just really much more comfortable touch typing and that I really need the tactile sensation of a keyboard in order to be an efficient typist. So I tried iPad keyboards, because iPad keyboards and iPad keyboard cases came out almost as soon as the iPad did. By early that summer, they were starting to flood the market, and I tried a whole bunch of them, and I could never find a workflow that really suited me that well. And then, lo and behold, Macworld Expo 2011 rolled around, and I walked into the press room, and just about everybody around me, including some of you Macworld people, Jason, were using 11-inch MacBook Airs.
Yes.
It was
Jim Dalrymple.
Yeah, and Jim Dalrymple too, and it was a complete V8 head-slapping moment going, that's what I should have done. As soon as I got back from Macworld Expo that week, I ordered a refurbed MacBook Air.
All Georgia uses. From
Apple's website online, and used it for a couple of years, straight up until I got my 15-inch MacBook Pro. So, it is just... It suits my workflow better, and I think that that's the same as a lot of people, which is why Apple moves so many of the MacBook Air. It's a nice, lightweight machine, powerful enough to get so much work done, battery life that lasts all day, and just a wonderful little system that gives us as much power as we need to get our work done.
Right, and I have to say, just being able to, sitting down, trying to work, as you said, with the touch keyboard, I think is really good, but also just sitting with it on your lap, it is easier to have my Air than it is to have my iPad.
What makes it interesting to me is that I think... I don't know if Apple knows the direction they're going in, but I think there's absolutely a direction that's being moved here. When you look at the iPad Air 2, it's being made thinner again because as soon as you get to a certain point of lightness, it almost becomes invisible when you carry it around. It goes, did I say invisible? I need a note on that, Jason. Invisible.
Divisible.
And it just goes in your bag or it goes in your hand, and you don't really think about it too much. But they also went to a 3-core processor, an 8-core graphics processor, and 2 gigabytes of RAM, and they're essentially running the standard version of iOS, which is way too light for that machine. But it makes me wonder, we've heard rumors about multi-window. With multi-window comes the implication or maybe the suggestion of being able to drag and drop data around so you can actually functionally use those multi-windows. But I keep hearing rumors of more as well, and it seems like right now with the iPad Air 2, the hardware has overtaken the capabilities of iOS, Jason, and I think there's room for iOS to leap forward and meet that.
Well, look, from the moment that the original iPad, I'm going to demo it here if you're watching the video, came out, right? It's got these little icons all spread out on the screen, like the Springboard, the home screen, has always felt like it wasn't really finished. When it came out the first time, I remember thinking, oh well, that weird spread it out, icon list, they're gonna fix that. They're gonna do a new version. That's just because they're basing this on the first, on the last iOS version for the iPhone. It'll all catch up, and you know what? It's never caught up. The iPad still feels like it's a lightly modified iPhone OS. And if you look at the iPhone sales numbers, it makes sense why. But at the same time, you do have to ask yourself, is one of the reasons that the iPad not maybe living up to its full potential is that Apple is not treating it as nicely as maybe it should and build features for it that are really iPad specific. And sometimes I wonder if maybe the existence of the iPhone 6 Plus might actually be the thing that gives a little more love to the iPad, just because they'll be like, hey, we've got these huge things, maybe we could do more things with them. It's like, we got a big iPhone, now we really need to do something with them, because it's just, I love my iPads and I use it all the time, but I do have those moments where I think this could probably do a lot more, but it would be stuff that doesn't make sense on the iPhone, and so it just doesn't happen.
Yeah, and the thing that I think is super cool here is originally Steve Jobs just wanted to expand the iPhone interface and stick that on the iPad, and the people in UI mercifully talked him out of that, and they came up at at a super race, at a super sprint, they came up with this split view controller, so you had one column on one side and multiple columns on the other side, and that made it more sophisticated. And Steve Jobs, to his credit, he saw that and said, yeah, go with it. It makes more sophisticated software. We're going to make better apps. But I think there's still room on top of that. Like the Apple Watch, it's based on a pared down version of iOS, but it's not really the iOS interface. Apple could have just thrown some lookalike version of iOS they had on there, but they really wanted to make something that made sense in the context of a watch. And OS X obviously is not iOS, so on the Mac they understand that context, and it feels like the iPad still bleeds too much from the iPhone context, and that if Apple could, had the time and resources and the druthers, and maybe that's what they're doing now, I don't know, to make the iPad its own thing the way the watch is its own thing, I think that could be super interesting.
I don't know, though, if with their sales numbers being what they are, that they have the impetus to be able to do that versus, spending the resources to work on my watch. Just a hint. But, if the sales start to droop, they would think about making, really spending some more time to make the interface kind of unique to the iPad. But I'm not so sure with the numbers being as it is that they have the thought to do that something first.
Well, I don't want it to be OS X
right now, and bugs that they're still kind of,
Yeah, again, I don't want it to be OS X. I don't want it to be a mod book, but I think there is room in between there. And you look at the Surface Pro is really a half laptop, half tablet thing, but there is room. One of the rumors we had, that Serenity wrote about, Jason, was the idea of an Apple Pen and a digitizer.
Yeah. Well, and we've talked about that the Apple story with pens on iOS and especially on the iPad has not been particularly great, and that like Surface had a much better digitizer story there, and Apple seems to have not cared. And one of the speculations I think that we've all been making is, what if the larger iPad is enough of an impetus for Apple to say, oh, well, a pen is a way to differentiate, and that gives us a reason to do it. And sometimes I think that's really how it happens, is just saying, like Georgia was saying about, like, do they really want to put time on this when they've got something like the Watch Project and they've got all these iPhones that they're selling? I feel like you end up with, you're searching for impetus for the things that are on your existing to-do list. I mean, this would be a little bit like if you've always been meaning to go to the hardware store, but the hardware store is like 5 miles away or 10 miles away, and then you need to go up there for some other reason, and you're like, oh, and I can go by the hardware store. I kind of feel like that's this. So maybe a larger iPad leads to pen support. Maybe it leads to other iOS features that, like, now we really need to do this because we've got this. And it may just be that the guys in software are sitting there saying, okay, hardware guys, now you want to do something fancy, so now we're finally going to be able to get this stuff prioritized on the software side. I don't know.
Time for a forced march again, guys. So sorry. So very sorry. Another thing, Peter, that interests me is that, and I've told this story before, but when you have a watch, suddenly having an iPhone 6 Plus isn't such a big deal because you can leave it in your purse, you can leave it in your pocket, and all those small but important interactions just get moved over to the watch. So you can have the bigger iPhone. You have the bigger iPhone, you don't need as portable an iPad. So maybe you can have the 9-inch or the 13-inch iPad, and then because you have the large iPad, maybe you don't need as much of a laptop, and you can have you don't need a small laptop. You can have a 15-inch MacBook or an iMac. I wonder if it's almost like a virtuous cycle now where Apple is getting this solid range of sizes, and that's going to enable people to pick either everything really small if that's what they want, or they can go big and not have to worry about inconvenience.
Well, I think the idea ultimately is for the interface, including the hardware interface itself, just to get out of the way. That's what Johnny Ive has said his end game is before. You know, that the task, getting the task done is what the important thing is, not what device you're using. The device that you're using and how you're using it really should be ancillary to focusing on your task itself. From that perspective, we've already gotten a preview of where Apple's going with this, with continuity in iOS 8 and Yosemite. You know, it's become more and more irrelevant what device you're using. You just get the job done. I make and take phone calls from my Mac all day long. I barely ever lift my phone anymore. Only do it when I absolutely need to. And sure, there are a few things here and there that Apple could iron out to make that work better, but the bottom line is that functionality is there now. Similarly, if I'm looking at a web page on my iPhone or on my iPad, I can go to my Mac and expect that web page to pop up in Safari. I can do the same thing with an email as well. So we've entered a period of time now where the focus is squarely on getting the task done as opposed to what device you're doing it. So yeah, I mean, large or small, I don't think it should matter too much.
It's interesting because in some ways Apple is incredibly incremental, but in other ways they let things sort of sit there until people are really frustrated or think that they've really been neglected, and then they move. Like the iPhone has gotten bigger slowly over every second generation has been a little bit bigger, and we know that the original iPhone was as big as Apple could possibly make it. They just couldn't make it any bigger, but they made bigger phones later that they just didn't like. They were too thick, or the battery life wasn't good, or they had other things they didn't like about it, and they waited till they could make the iPhone. Yeah, Georgia has the original iPhone there. Say something, Georgia.
Oh.
Here we go. So here we have the original, beautiful, sweet,
the 3G.
small,
That's not
yes.
the original?
And
No, she has a 3G.
3G. And then here we have, do you have the original there? Oh, look at here.
He might be pulling out a Newton. We don't know.
That's right.
Not that original. And
I
so
have a
here we
Newton
have,
here too, but I'm not looking for
here's
that.
my little, and so you can kind of tell the difference, and this is with a case. Though I have to say the 3G's feel in my hand is beautiful. Love the rounded feel to it.
In my
But
hand, it feels like a toy almost now. It's amazing how your brain changes.
it feels lighter, but it still has a beautiful touch to it. It's really rounded. It's really very smooth. Even the edges, they did a nice job with it to think that, you know, how many years ago.
I always got the polished Riverstone sort of sense from my iPhone, my original
All right,
iPhone
people.
3G.
Here we go.
Oh, here we found it.
Original iPhone
There we go.
Oh,
6 Plus.
look at the stripe.
And this is the best part, is that of course, these original iPhones fit on the screen of the 6 Plus. But the original iPhone, I think the 6 design actually is the closest that they've come to the original iPhone design. It's got that curved edge and the silvery back.
Yep.
And this is a really nice piece of hardware. I mean, if it's running ancient iOS, and you wouldn't want to probably use it, but it is a beautiful piece of hardware. Even it's got some quirks like the silver bezel on the front that doesn't match the silver on the back, but you know, it's a beautiful piece of work.
It's gorgeous, and they do that kind of stuff, but they also do the massive leap forward. Like, you know, Peter had to put up with people asking him about new Mac Pros, I think, for years and years and years, and then all of a sudden Phil Schiller comes up there and says, "Not innovating anymore, my ass," and Peter's eyes light up like a kid on Christmas.
Well, that's just Peter likes it when they swear on stage.
I do. I admit it.
Peter likes it when they swear anywhere.
That's why I like T-Mobile so much. John Ledger is a potty mouth.
Yeah.
So, yeah, a couple of quick bits of news. iOS 8.1.3 is out, and in addition to a bunch of fixes, it also reduces the amount of space you need on your iPhone in order to upgrade. So if space alone and hatred of iTunes has made you not upgrade, you can now do 8.1.3, and OS 10 10.10.2 is out, which will fix Wi-Fi for a lot of people and no doubt cause Wi-Fi for a lot of people. It always seems to happen. Also got a bunch of security fixes. Anyone have anything they noticed with the updates? I just found the OS 10 update took a long time, but the iOS update was lickety-split for me.
I love that they're actually addressing when the whole 8.1.1 thing happened. One of the conversation points was that Apple's updates seem to not be really understanding that people don't have room, and that they need to do a better job somehow of getting those updates to fit in less space. They need to put some engineering effort at it. I don't know how much space they saved with this one, but I am encouraged by that because, you know, it's a problem. It is preventing people from upgrading their phones, and, you know, they need to find a way. I don't know even what the way is. I understand it's a hard engineering problem, but even if they're just copying some of your data off onto their servers temporarily. I don't even know what to do, but something to address it, to do a better job of updating the stuff in place.
We talked about that a little bit on MacBreak, and it's they obviously know the issue, and because they all have family members who have iPhones who complain about the same issues that we complain about. And there's a bunch of ideas that went around. Like some people were talking about doing Delta, like streaming bits, the way Google does with Chrome, where things that aren't major can just be streamed out all the time, and little things can just get fixed. Apple did their first forced push for the iMac, for the Mac line. Boy, I can't speak anymore. For the Mac line a couple of weeks ago, and there's a whole bunch of different technologies. It just depends what's reliable and what people will accept and what Georgia will actually bother to update.
Well, unfortunately, now I'm stuck on the stream of having to update because my phone has been crashing quite a lot. One, just because I'm playing Candy Crush Soda and it keeps on trying to log into Rene's Facebook account.
It's trying to stop you from playing.
So that causes it to crash. But
yeah, Georgia, if you ever see me, if you're a friend of mine on Facebook and you see a lot of Candy Crush activity, that is actually Georgia.
It's actually me stealing. I don't have Facebook, so I have to steal Rene's account in order to use it. I'm not, though. It keeps on trying to log in now and will not stop, and that does cause the phone to crash. But it does crash on its own once every 2 weeks, so I've been updating religiously, which is completely against my nature, but in hopes that it will stop my phone from crashing.
And Peter, the OS 10 update fixed Thunderstrike, fixed the Google 0 days. It looked pretty good to me.
Yeah, absolutely. The security stuff, I think, was extremely important and stuff that probably a lot of Mac users didn't even recognize. But yeah, it seems to be a solid update so far. It was a big update. Took a while to download, took a while to install. But it seems to be working out for a lot of people okay right now. I'm still waiting for the inevitable wave of complaints to start.
Also, brand new today, Outlook for iOS. It is accompli. I think that's how you're supposed to pronounce it, even in American. Accompli, rebranded, purchased by Microsoft, repurposed. It has Exchange support for Office 365. It'll also support your Gmail. Jason, do you miss? I don't miss Office 365. Do you?
Not especially. Although I look at this and think, man, I wish we had this when I was working at IDG and we had the Exchange, because we had to use Outlook web app, and it looks really good. And for people who are in that world, yay for them, because this is going to be a nice addition for them. But I don't particularly miss it. No.
No, and it's amazing Microsoft's level of support. I mean, today there was a story that went out that they're purchasing part of Cyanogen. I mean, Microsoft's support for non-Microsoft platforms is at an all-time high.
Yeah, well, that's what Satya Nadella said last week, right? Is that they, their view is we're going to put our services everywhere, and then we're going to integrate as much as possible with Windows so that it's just sort of built into Windows. But that's a far cry from the old approach, which was, we're really reluctant to bring any of our stuff to any other platform. Nadella just doesn't play that way, and that's good for everybody on every other platform who uses Microsoft stuff.
It's so amazing to me because years ago, the whole reason Google bought Android was because they were worried that Microsoft's mobile platforms would control internet browsing and lock them out. And now we flash forward to today, and Microsoft is investing in Cyanogen so that Google's services layer doesn't lock people out of Android, and Microsoft is making products for Android and iOS while Google refuses to make products for Windows Mobile. It's a very topsy-turvy universe that this tech lives in. All right, so Jason, thank you so much for joining us. If people want to visit you on your amazing site, if they want to listen to your phenomenal podcast, where can they go?
Oh, it's a phenomenon. Podcasting is a phenomenon. They can go to sixcolors.com, S-I-X, colors, spell it with the U or without, depending on if you're Canadian or British or whatever. It doesn't matter. It'll get you there. That. And theincomparable.com for my pop culture podcasts, and I've got 2 tech podcasts at relay.fm, Upgrade, and Clockwise.
All of which are excellent. And if people want to see you on Twitter, it's at jsnell.
That's it. I'm there all the time.
Peter Cohen, what about you, sir?
I am at iMore, which you don't spell with a U in any language. And you can also
I should reserve that. Wait a minute. Now people are going to go do it. Curse you, Peter.
And you can also find me on Twitter and the other social things at Flarg, F-L-A-R-G-H.
Nice. And what about you, Georgia?
You can find me on another podcast called Isometric. There's Vector,
from a
iMore.
New perspective.
And you can also find me on Twitter. It's at Georgia_Dow.
And you should also watch and listen to Georgia play Dungeons & Dragons with me on The Incomparables Total.
Which is so much fun.
There we go. Put it back on. Put it back on,
I
Georgia.
have so much. Here we go. Wait. There we go.
Whomsoever,
War helmet, +2 war helmet there. Yeah.
There we go.
whomsoever should she be worthy shall have the power of Thor. There.
Yeah.
So worthy. If they were here, you could find Serenity at, well, you can find them regardless of them being here or not. You can find Serenity at Settern, Settern. You can find Ali at iMuggle. You can find me at Rene Ritchie. And I want to thank all of you for joining us. You are amazing. It is 2015 is the year of you people being amazing.
You got the year right that time, Rene. Yay!
Thanks for the note, Jason.
He would have been doing that for months.
He's going to be writing it on all his podcasts. It's just
all my podcast checks.
That's it.
Thanks, everybody.